Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and I pick from those each week. And I usually pick around 25, there's 27 written down for today. And if you can, I typically try to get ones that are most relevant for whatever's going on at that moment, seasonally or whatever, or ones I haven't answered in a little while, or ones that I frequently get, maybe some that come up where I did a video during the week and there were 8 questions on the same thing. Obviously, I had just forgotten to say something. Sometimes I'll pick one of those up from those videos as well. So thank you for following along with them. Again, there are going to be lots of questions coming up in the video. First of all, the weekly garden planner, the new weekly garden planner, the $30 discount has basically 2 more weeks on it before the $30 discount goes away. It's linked down below the video. You can go over to the website to learn more about it, but it's basically the year broken down into weeks and how you maintain the garden. I'm in zone 8A. There is some video information in it about how to kind of translate it to your zone if you live in a different zone, and there's going to be some content related around different zones as well coming up with the weekly garden planner. But again, 2 more weeks on the discount. It ends at the end of the month, so that may be a week and a half. Let's see. This has been a crazy week in the garden. I think there'll have been 4 videos come up with all the things we're doing. Planted some perennials in the border behind me. Working on containers. Parts of the vegetable garden went in. Lots of pruning got done. Really crazy amount going on in the garden here. We've got plants laid out everywhere. New Chamilia went in here that'll be in a video in a day or so. Tons and tons of things, and another week and a half of it minimum of rapid fire annuals, perennials, shrubs, and trees going in the ground. So it's fun, actually. We've just ended up with some extra space here that we hadn't been accessible for the first 4 years of the project. So it's just kind of fun rearranging some things and adding some things to the garden, because we are running out of space, as you guys know who've been watching for a while. Let's see. There would have been a video up from the new garden down in Wallace, just putting out wood chips initially. That's the first step there. We're going to have a planning video there coming up during the month of May. I already have the day scheduled that we're going to be down there, and a couple events this week. I'm speaking to a student group on NC State, which is not relevant for this video, this week. And then I'm speaking at Ralston Blooms on Saturday. So at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum on Saturday. If you come out to Ralston Blooms, I am speaking there. You can go over to the J.C. Ralston website and look at the schedule for Ralston Blooms. So I'm hoping there's a good crowd over there. Hope the weather's perfect. Last year, the weather for Ralston Blooms was absolutely perfect. Had a perfect day over there, so I'm hoping that'll be the case. Big plant sale associated with Ralston Blooms. Absolutely, lots and lots of interesting, rare, unusual plants, and some pretty common plants as well. But fun day. It should be a fun day at the Ralston. But then immediately getting in the car and driving down to Wallace, because there's a garden gala down at the the gardens of southeastern North Carolina at Johnson Nursery on Saturday afternoon. Steph and I will actually be there, and we should be there around 4. It's most of the events. I don't remember what time the event is, but it's most of the afternoon. We should be down there about 4 after we leave Ralston Blooms. If you're in that Wilmington area, southeast North Carolina area, we will be at that. There is a fee for that, and there's a short clip of video at the very end of this video. It's actually a fundraiser for the garden itself, not our garden, but the existing botanic garden there and the things that they're doing in the community in that area. So, but again, there's a video at the very end of this if you want to go and watch it. As kind of an invitation to the garden gala there. So this will be a busy day. It'll be a very, very busy day next Saturday. Thank you to everyone who bought t-shirts that were announced in last Sunday's video. We shipped out a bunch on Tuesday. Somebody actually sent me a photo on Wednesday with the t-shirt on. So one of them got there very quick. I hope most everybody at this point should have received theirs, I would think. Unless you ordered on Wednesday. We're going to ship every Tuesday. So if you ordered on Wednesday, it'll be going out on Tuesday. So there you go. Thank you very much for everyone who has bought a t-shirt already. There's 3. There's going to be a t-shirt coming up for Holly. Holly, the horticultural husky, or horticulture husky, don't know what it's going to say yet, and a couple other shirts as well. And people asked about women's shirts and all kinds of things. Yes, there's going to be lots of different variations of shirts coming as well. These were just the 3 we initially ordered. Okay, actual garden question and answer video starts now. Okay, so I meant to answer this one last week, and somehow I skipped it by accident. A person got bought some milkweed. They were promised by the store it had not been sprayed, and then they ended up getting what's called Black Death. It killed a lot of the caterpillars on their milkweed, and so they suspected that they were in fact sprayed. I think that Black Death actually comes from a fungus that can get on the leaves of the milkweed more than it necessarily is it being sprayed. With that being said, it could have been sprayed, but I don't know. You know, I'm saying that there's a possibility that it wasn't sprayed, but it had another issue that came with it, or happened in your garden, or whatever. For me, milkweed is one of those things we do from seed here at the house. We have several different milkweeds we do, and they were all started from seed here in the garden. That way I didn't have to buy it anywhere else and bring it home. So that would be my suggestion going forward, is most of the milkweed's fairly easy from seed. It can take as much as a couple years to get it into a form where it will flower and actually has some substance for the caterpillars to eat. But we do them from seed here at the house. But I suspect that Black Death didn't necessarily have to do with it ever having been sprayed. Okay, somebody is putting a camellia up in zone 6 in the Northeast and wanted to know, how to figure out where to put it. So if you're buying one of the camellias that's zone 6, that's supposed to be zone 6 hardy, and there are a couple series of camellias that are zone 6 to 9. You can Google this. There's again a couple series. The winter series is one of them, and then one other that are reputedly zone 6 hardy. So those are going to have, but in zone 6, you're definitely going to want them out of the winter winds. They're tucked up near the house somewhere, but a bright place that can get some sunlight during the summer. They're part shade plants. Part shade still means some sun. So I would think that someplace it's going to get some sun, but out of the wind. Then there was another question, and I think these two questions kind of relate, and I'll get to that in just a second, about somebody who was looking at this garden, and they're in the Pacific Northwest, maybe in the Seattle area, Portland area, I don't know where. But how is it that this garden is so far ahead of them, despite the fact that we're in the same zone? This is an interesting thing, because you think about the zone map only registers our average low temperature. So your average low temperature in the Pacific Northwest, same as the average low temperature here in Raleigh, but it has nothing to do with sunlight and how long the days are during the wintertime. We're at latitude 35 and Seattle is 47. The difference there is probably almost, I don't know what it is, I'm guessing, I shouldn't be guessing at anything, but probably 45 minutes to an hour shorter day in the peak of winter in the Pacific Northwest. And so that balances back out. The sun moves north of me and you get longer days in the summer than I do. But in the wintertime, I get much longer days. And here in the early part of the spring, those longer days are going to warm the soil up more than they will in your area. And that's what's going to jump the plants out ahead. So that's what you're seeing, is that yes, we have the same nighttime low temperatures, but that doesn't mean anything about how fast the soil is going to warm up with my slightly longer days in early April, or in March and early April, than you would have in your area in the Pacific Northwest. And then back up to this question about this camellia in zone 6. Keep in mind, even if this thing is cold hardy to those temperatures, your days are also shorter. So you're going to linger longer at lower temperatures than, let's say, somebody that's in zone 6 who's out in a low, in a more southerly latitude someplace. And that's that will have some impact. When I do consultations frequently, like Long Island is zone 7B. Wouldn't surprise me if part of it is moved into 8A in the updated zone map. But when you look at it and you actually go visually see it, you're not going to see as many of these leafy evergreens that we're growing necessarily in zone 7B and 8A down here. And it is that length of daylight in the wintertime. So despite the fact that my low temperature and your low temperature are the same, you're staying at that low temperature potentially longer and staying below freezing potentially longer each day. And that will have an impact on what you can grow. But that was a great question about the Seattle thing, because it is true that you're going to be behind. And then, you know, again, in a few weeks, the sun's going to be north of us, you know, tracking east to west, but north of us. And you're going to have longer days than we do during the summertime. Let's see. So somebody had made a comment, and this is not a question, this is actually put down as 2.5 by Steph, who wrote these down for me. Somebody had made a comment about the garden being, they loved the fact this garden was manicured yet random. That is my entire style. Somebody actually summed up manicured but random. Yes, I've always wondered, well, what is this style that I've always had? This has always been every landscape job I ever did, any place I've ever worked. I leave it and it looks neat and orderly. You know, the paths are neat, the stonework, all those kinds of things. But then the plants are more random, the beds are left more natural. So yes, thank you very much for saying manicured but random, because that was the perfect, I think it's the perfect perfect description of how I like to landscape. How do we keep rabbits from nibbling? We don't. Unfortunately, we have a rabbit issue here. The vegetable garden is surrounded by a deer fence. I talk about it all the time. When the new fence goes in back here, so the month of April here is planting. The month of May is going to be hardscaping in this garden. And I've been going through some old photos, showing, you know, looking at some of the walls and steps and other things I've built in the past. I got so tired of doing them that was the reason I quit landscaping, actually. But I kind of look forward to doing a few of these projects coming up, just on my own and at my own pace. But when the new fence goes in, it's going to have boards down at the bottom to hopefully keep the rabbits out. And then the chain link fence we share over here, I'm going to attach that deer fence to it. So you really won't be able to see it from any distance, but it will be a block, hopefully, for the rabbits. I'm hoping to block off at least some space from them because they are obnoxious. Somebody wants to grow that Taiga clematis down in zone 9A, Alabama, in the full sun nearly all day. Is that a good idea? So here's the thing, and I've talked about this this is going to be the same with pretty much every vine. So you could grow in 9A in Alabama, you could grow our native yellow jessamine, you could grow star jasmine, you could grow just all kinds of vines. There's all kinds of vines native to the southeast and non-native to the southeast. Most vines are available to you. The problem with clematis and and many vines is they actually like to grow with their roots in the shade and the top in the sun. So my recommendation here is that the clematis will be fine growing up into the sun, but I would plant it down at the bottom of a post or another plant or a fence or something that will shade the roots on it, because that's the actual issue with clematis. A lot of people plant them deep to, one, they'll root out from it just like tomato plants will, but the other thing is it keeps the roots cool. They actually like, and this is true with just a lot of vines, they like cool roots and hot tops. They're all trying to grow up to the top of the trees to get the sunlight, but the bottom of the plant's down in the shade. Okay, so any vine you plant, I'm just summing this up as any vine you plant, try to get the roots shaded if you can, but in a place where the top of the plant can get up into the sunlight. Okay, I get this occasionally. Person is removing some clay in the soil when they're amending it. Now he has a big pile in his backyard. What should he do with it? I don't know what you're going to do with the soil. I have no idea, but I would point out that, and another person answered this, I think the clay that you have, despite it being, you know, visually and physically unappealing, right? It's hard to work in, and it's like you look at it and don't think anything could possibly grow in it. It is actually nutrient dense and is better either planting plants directly in it or it amended in place. But I leave any clay in place. It was something I had to train all the people that worked for me in landscaping over the years. Everybody, I'd come back to job sites and they got every 3-gallon plant that they planted in the landscape. If I go and look at the pot, it's got this much soil in the bottom of it. We're throwing soil away. So it takes a while to even train people that were working in landscaping to say, hey, I don't want to take anything away with this. All this stuff has nutrients in it that the plants need. So in the future, I wouldn't amend the soil quite as much, or, figure out how to, mound the plants up slightly in the clay so that you're actually just using the clay as well, because it is actually good for your plants. The other thing is, if you dig a hole in clay soil, and there's something else coming up about digging holes in clay as well, but if you dig a hole in clay soil, you're basically building or digging an inverted pot, like a container in the ground. So when it rains, water's always going to find the easiest way into the ground. It's always going to, water is just amazing that way. It will race through anything, destroy anything, and it wants to get to the lowest spot as quick as possible. That low spot, every time you dig a hole in your garden, is the holes, right? So if you amend those holes with a lot of organic material, a lot of times the water is going to get into those holes and keep that organic material way too wet. So plugging that hole back up with a little bit of clay mixed in with the compost, or nothing, you don't have to amend the soil, you're better off in the future doing that. What you do with the big pile of soil that you've amassed, I don't really know. I don't know how good a quality clay it is. Maybe you can make pots or something like that. But it's a great question. And again, it's one of those that there's just literally every employee I ever hired, I had to convince that we weren't going to be carrying all the materials off the site when we left. We were going to incorporate them into the native soil, into the native beds. Okay, would you recommend a berm for planting a privacy hedge in clay with root rot issues? So yeah, if you do have clay soil where it's staying boggy or wet, and you don't want to plant plants down in it, can you berm them up? Yes. Keep in mind though, any berm you make, you're going to need to water more. At least initially, you're going to need to water it more. So yeah, you can absolutely berm up for planting above either wet spaces or in wooded spaces. I've done this in wooded spaces before where you just flat out couldn't dig. And I've basically created beds, meandering, berms basically through wooded areas, and then planted in it, and then put drip irrigation on it because I knew it was going to stay really dry until those plants had an opportunity to root in. But yeah, you can do it, but you'll need more water. Somebody said, am I going to put a dance floor? Is the patio going to be a dance floor to accompany the back porch disco lights? Yes, that when I put the back porch in, I put lights in there. I don't know, I guess I've shown it before at some point in the past, but the lights that are integrated up into the top of it will flash all kinds of colors. There's a remote control for it. I just want them on regular lights, but the lights I bought were, you could just make them in any color you want and any kind of pattern flashing and all kinds of stuff that we can do with them. I doubt I'll ever do a whole lot with them, but we are gonna put lights from the back porch to the building and another strand going back to that back corner this way. So I will have lights out here. I'll turn them off at night. I don't really, I like it dark out here once I'm done with it. But we will have lights over the garden for the evening before the spring is over, I hope. Let's see. Number 8, and it's actually 2 in 1. What plant will I never grow again? It's a funny question because I say this and then I will run into something that I really like. I don't really care for daylilies. A lot of people do. It's just not my thing, and that's okay. Everybody, when I plant something in this garden, some portion of the audience watching that video is gonna, that's not a plant for me. Some people don't like the chartreuse foliage or the variegated foliage I use so much of. Some people aren't gonna like all kinds of things. That's the best thing about having all of these options, right? All of these things that we can mix and blend together as differing opinions. Good. You can go and do something else, and then the other, everybody gets to enjoy what they enjoy, and that's kind of one of the fun parts of this. And then I will come up with judging things kind of harshly, plants that I've grown or whatever, and then I'll run across one that I really like. As an example, with the daylily, we have one called Autumn Minuet. It gets this tall. It's the coolest daylily it's just the coolest daylily. It has little foliage that's insignificant. It's one of the issues I have with daylilies is there's so much foliage that doesn't necessarily look good, and then they bloom such a short period of time. This one has very little foliage and then blooms this tall in the late summer, early fall. It's just a cool plant. So it changed. It's one of the plants I ran into. So you go around going, I don't like daylilies, and then one day, oh, there's a daylily I liked. Liriope. You know, Liriope spicata, you know, this is one of the worst plants you could ever plant. Just such an invasive plant that's just impossible to kill. Roundup won't kill it, nothing will kill it. And then, you know, I grew a lot of Liriope muscari, which is the clumping Liriope, which is lots and lots of people use. Unfortunately, sometimes people occasionally get Liriope spicata either by accident or unknowingly, and it spreads like crazy. The other one is the clumping one. But then, you know, in our travels the last few years, I've run into some really cool giant Liriopes, interesting Liriopes. I never thought I would say that at all. So I'm careful with the I'll never grow it again question, because there's probably somebody out there that loves it, that's working on it, and is trying to improve it, and they'll prove me, you know, my opinion wrong at some point, or your opinion wrong, or whatever, you know, or change your opinion in some way. I don't say wrong, but change your opinion in some way. But again, everybody's got their likes and dislikes in the garden, and that's great, because we have so many things we can work with. And then it said, if I ever liked to plant and then 4 to 5 years later lost interest. I think that, you know, with plant breeding, we've seen a lot of staying in front of this. I think if the original Loropetalum that had been released were the only ones that had ever been released, I don't think anybody would be growing them anymore. They grew 3 and 4 feet a weekend, it felt like, but now we're down to this Purple Daydream Loropetalum, which I think right now is the best of the dwarf Loropetalums, and it's still red flowers on it right now. Basically solid purple. It'll get a few green leaves in it this early spring period of time, coming out of winter, but just an absolutely perfect plant, ornamental plant in almost every way, you know. But again, it's come a long way over the years. There are some things, you know, we're seeing. You know, crepe myrtles definitely went out of favor with me over time. When I was much younger, you know, I loved them, but over time, and it's more, I would say that the plants that I lose interest in are the ones that get overplanted. So, you know, a new plant comes along and it's just the latest and the greatest, and I was 20 some years in the nursery business, and I was always trying to stay ahead of the curve. It was kind of my business, you know, my actual business model was to try to have plants that, you know, ahead of other people. And then 10 years later, you were like, oh my gosh, it's like 10% all the plants being sold right this minute. And then, you know, so there's that where you can get excited about something and then it just feels like it's just overplanted and overdone. Okay, let's see. I don't know if I answered those questions or not. Number 9, somebody's up in Baltimore. They have lesser celandine, this is a terrible, terrible weed. It's one of the worst invasives. We showed it in a video here a month and a half ago, blooming up the street, and we have some of it in this garden as well. It is a terrible, terrible weed, man, it's got. If you are seeing that weed anywhere, it needs to go as quick as you can get it. Again, it's spread through the neighborhood. It's in a big wet area up here, but it seems to be even tolerant of mildly dry soils, not incredibly dry soils, but pretty dry soils. And so we have some of it in the front garden here as well. It seeds itself like crazy. You know, the plants in that ranunculus family, they're unbelievable at producing seed. And then their question, you know, it's actually growing under a black walnut. So if anybody ever asks you what'll grow under a black walnut, a very invasive weed, should they spray it with glyphosate? Yes, I think glyphosate, and even that's what's being recommended by literally everyone. It kills it fast and pretty effectively. There's no way to dig it out. And I mean, there's just simply zero way to dig it out. I've tried to kick it. I've tried to walk by and pull it. I've tried to pull it out with a trowel, you're going to miss some of it and it's just going to come right back up. And that way it's like Bermuda. You know, if you try to pull Bermuda grass, you're just not getting it up unless you were the luckiest person in the world. So yeah, it needs to be sprayed, and glyphosate's the right thing to do. If you have other things, just be careful not to spray other things, because glyphosate will, you know, it's a non-selective herbicide, so it will kill anything, any leafy thing it gets on. You can spray right around the very bottom of trees, and it'll say that on the label, but not on any of the green foliage and not up the trunk, but up near the base of it. It's not something, you know, you don't hear me recommending chemicals on here very often, but there is no way you will get rid of this weed unless you go out there and spray it. You may need to think about changing the conditions that are allowing it to thrive like that underneath the tree. After you get it killed, you can mulch it. They ask if you could mulch it to kill it. No, it's coming up in my mulched areas. Well, we only have mulched areas, right? So you know it's coming up in just the mulched areas. So yeah, that it will come up in mulch as well. But I think that you can prevent it from coming back as quickly by killing it and then mulching. And it will have a harder time coming up through the mulch. It's still going to be there. There's a lot of seed. The seed bank is huge. It produces a ton of very good quality seed, and so you're going to be spraying for a few years. But once you do the main spraying and the mulching and put the mulch cap on it, it'll just be here and there. It won't be just don't let it get out of control again. So somebody said, again, you know, I get people that dislike those types of answers that involve chemicals, but that's what there is no cure for that particular weed other than a herbicide of some kind. Let's see. Benefits of auger over a shovel. Heard shovels create a glazed wall. I don't know why they would create a glazed wall. I guess in clay soils, if it's wet, the shovel sliding in closes off the air, you know, closes off the channels in between there. I don't know that the auger does anything different to that. It sounds like somebody trying to sell you an auger. Augers are great. If you benefit from using an auger to dig holes, absolutely go and get yourself an auger. Make sure you get a good quality drill so that you don't hurt yourself with one of the augers. It needs to, that you can get hurt with the wrong drill using those augers. But absolutely, if the auger helps you, if it helps you stand up to dig with one, I'll probably use some form of an auger to dig these post holes for the fence over here. Absolutely. You know, it's whatever works for you to get the job done. But at the end of the day, I do like to kind of dig funky holes, you know, so that, you know, the square holes, you know, rigid, you know, I don't want just perfect little holes down in the ground. You know, I don't want the plants to potentially hit the wall and root around in a circle at all. So I want them, you know, when I'm digging, I'm not trying to dig an absolutely perfect circle down into the ground. I'm digging a pretty gnarly hole just to prevent any of that from happening. But I don't think the shovel or the auger is one of them does more damage or less damage or would cause more problems or less problems. I think that's somebody, again, trying to sell you something. If an auger benefits you, buy it and use it like crazy. I've used a bulb auger for 40 years. It's whatever you like to do. And, you know, don't let people selling affect that. Let's see. Is it ever a bad time to add compost to planting beds? I think that there's a limit to the amount of organic material depending on the planting bed. So for my annuals, which includes flowering annuals and the vegetable garden, the seasonal plants, I add a lot of compost because I want to get as much out of them as I possibly can. The beds out here, though, I did it once, and then the mulch breaking down is becoming compost and humus, and I just don't need to add anything more than the decorative mulch that we're adding to the beds. Then I'll say that most of our native perennial plants would probably prefer to go into your native soil without a lot of amendments. I've talked about that a couple times now, that, you know, the cone flowers back here in this incredibly enriched soil don't do as well as the ones out there in the front where it's a little hotter, but also I didn't do as much amending of that soil out there. Literally every native perennial that I have out at the street has performed better than any of the native perennials that I've put in this section where the sun shines heavily in the back garden, where it's been overly amended. So you can get to the point of over amending things for sure. Without considering cost, what is the optimum size to plant for impact and growth? Well, I guess 3-gallon containers have always been kind of the trade's main plant that you're going to see, you know, in a garden center. I've got this absolutely beautiful copper top viburnum right there that's a full 3-gallon container. What we've always had is like trade threes is what they're called. So they're cheap threes, they're 10 quarts. That's mostly what we've always seen. This is actually a full 3. I've stared at these pots long enough that I know how many quarts they are. Then there's full 2 gallons, which are 8-quart pots. There's cheap 2 gallons, which are 6-quart pots. And then we have full gallons, which are obviously 4 quarts. And then most of the gallons that are out in the world are trade gallons, we call them. They're just 3-quart pots. I'll show you one of those. Okay, let's go. This is a trade gallon container. That's a 3-quart pot. It's always been called a 1 gallon. It's not a 1 gallon, it's 3 quarts. There's one that's slightly larger than this that you'll run into that's actually a full gallon. A couple of the states require now that it says exactly what it is. So it has to say 3 quarts if it's the cheap gallon like that one is. What is the best size for optimum growth? Optimum, I don't, for me, the smaller the plant going in, the better. From a 1 gallon to a 3 gallon is probably my optimum size for growth. But I'll plant quart containers in a second. Here's a quart. You know, here's an Asarum. Here's an Asarum that came from Plant Delights. Look at this cool flower. I hope you can see that flower. That flower is the coolest thing right there. You see that? Asarum flower right down at the ground. That's a quart pot. For me, I'd prefer this because for finances, for digging a hole, for enjoying it, watching it grow in the garden, all of those reasons, for me, trade gallon containers and down, I've probably been yelling, that air conditioner's been running, and down to these quarts. For optimum growth and value, it's probably 3-gallon containers because it's the biggest things are being produced in. So that copper top viburnum, you know, it probably came from a field of 5,000 of them. So from an efficiency standpoint, you know, that's probably where the best value resides, is in the 3 gallons and the trade 3 gallons, the 10-quart pots as well. No, there's a lot of words, but I prefer planting smaller things. I've talked about that many times. I like smaller plants. The 3-gallon stuff is probably from the economy state and, you know, getting that, you know, you're probably less likely for that plant to die, you know, having it that big already. So it can absorb some sort of issue a little better than that tiny little plant could, right? It could absorb, you didn't water it for a week and it lost half its leaves. It's big enough to absorb a little bit of damage, abuse. Let's call it abuse. Let's see, what spring white viburnum will grow well tree formed? Lots of viburnums you can tree form. We've got the Shasta viburnum out front that's in bloom now that we're tree forming. And my Chinese snowball viburnum is in full bloom right this minute. Looks fantastic over there. It's tree formed. My viburnum nudum is in the process of tree forming itself, and it'll have white flowers on it here in the next few weeks, and looks absolutely beautiful out here. So any viburnum that gets tall is the answer to that question. The most, the showiest of all of the tree formed viburnums, though, is going to be the Chinese snowball. Okay, what drone do we use? I use the DJI Mini, and I got the Mini Pro because it comes with 3 batteries. It's kind of funny. That drone is 249 grams. And the FAA wrote the rules for drones a few years ago, and they said any drone over 250 grams has to follow these rules because they didn't want to include kids' toys, basically. And so then the drone companies went to work making 249-gram drones. So they didn't have to follow any of the FAA rules or follow as many of the FAA rules. You still have to register it, but you don't necessarily, you have to, there's less rules to follow. But anyway, it's a 249 gram drone. I can put the thing in my pocket. It shoots incredible video. It's super stable. We put it up above us and work for 15 minutes on a battery, and then and the video is just super stable. It doesn't move around. I had a bigger drone, another DJI Mavic, and it would drift over the course of 10 minutes or so. And so when I went to do the video work, I had to re-center the video over the course of the 10 minutes or so. Okay. So somebody has camellias and trees growing in their grass. They need to get rid of the grass. How? Can they simply mulch over it, or they have to pull it manually? Okay, so, back to that, glyphosate question about the lesser celandine. You can certainly spray it. You can certainly put cardboard over it. You could certainly put some sort of plastic over it for a little while and try to kill it that way. My technique is to mow it as low as you possibly can, and it may take a few times lowering the lawnmower. You can't always put your lawnmower on the scalping position and just go right after it. You may have to lower it several times. But I scalped all the weedy stuff that was back here. This was just all variations of invasive weeds and invasive plants like ivy and Liriopes spicata and mondo grass and all kinds. It was everything. You name it, it was back here. I scalped it as low as it would go. Sheared it off right to the ground, and then I composted over it, put the wood chips over top of it, and then dared anything to peek its head up through it. And that's how I got rid of 95%. A little Liriope popped up for about a year or two back here, and that was it. So that's the technique I've used, is just scalp it as low as you can go, and then bury it in mulch shortly thereafter, as fast as you can, and get the beds cut in. I would cut the bed edges before you do any of this, so you already are prepared to mulch. I'd even have the mulch on site at the time you do this. Get the mulch on site, get the beds edged the way you want them edged, and then scalp the grass. Just cut the grass as low as you possibly can, and then mulch over it and dare anything to pick it up. And then at that point, anything that does pop up through the mulch, you can decide, am I going to spray it? Am I going to pull it? Am I going to, whatever the heck you want to do. But that's the way I did it. I could kill 90% of it that way. Do we ever go to Duke Gardens? Yeah. And we went there in the fall, and I took a ton of photos of a lot of grasses. I intended to make a grass video in the fall and early winter. I still have all those photos. I kind of been waiting for us to do some traveling to use some photos that I took last fall. But there'll be a ornamental grass video at some point this year. And it was most of the photos were taken over at Duke Gardens. The director of Duke Gardens lives right over there, right over here. And I've met him a few times. Let's see. Hellebore babies. At what point should they dig up and transplant, thin, or leave in place? You're definitely going to have to thin them. If you have hellebores that are crossing and making viable seed, you will have more than you ever want. So you're going to have to thin them at some point. You might want to wait for the ones you're going to transplant. You might want to wait till their second season, because there'll be seedlings about this tall right now. I might thin the ones you want to thin, and then the ones you're going to transplant, wait till they start putting on new growth next spring to transplant them. That'd probably be the way I would go, but you're definitely going to have to thin them no matter what. You could dig some up now and give them away as well to other folks. They probably transplant better in their second season. They take about 3 years, to come to flower the first time. That's one of the reasons hellebores cost so much money. Somebody asked for plant selections around utility boxes. I get mailbox questions, utility boxes, all of those kinds of things. My suggestion on those things, and when I do consultations with folks, is to make those beds bigger than just the utility box. Frequently, I'll saw it all the time. Utility boxes that are maybe shared. Frequently they'll put the electric boxes half on your property and half on the neighbor's property. Maybe it's all on your property, but a lot of times they're right there on the shared line. Two neighbors are sharing the box, and they'll surround the box with 4 shrubs. And to me, it makes me look at the box more than I did before. Same thing with mailbox plantings. Nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that it's better if you can, and you have a place to do it, make the bed bigger And so that you can maybe take people's eyes away from the box a bit and make it, if you just surround the box with plants, it makes you look at the box. If you have a drift of plants, you know, some sort of, you know, teardrop shaped bed that, you know, you have some plants coming around the box and then up the hill just a bit or down the hill or wherever away from the box, then it looks like it's, you know, a planned bed, and it's not you hiding a box. If you just do nothing but try to hide the box, you will draw more attention to the box. It's always been the same thing with me for mailboxes. And again, I know people love to plant around mailboxes, make beds around mailboxes. People love to do it. It's like the national pastime. It's baseball and mailbox planting. But for me, it always like, that mailbox, the ugliest thing in the garden, and we're making it stand out. If you do mailbox planting, same thing. I just make the bed much bigger so that the mailbox becomes one little thing in the bed, and the bed is a much bigger, you know, expression of you and the things that you like and the plants that you want to have out there. So it's just, again, but these are my opinions that should have no impact on the way in which you garden at your house. But that's always the suggestion I make to folks in consultations, is make the beds bigger so that you draw the eye away from them a bit, or they become balanced in the bed and aren't the focal point of the bed. Okay, so somebody used cardboard and mulch on cardboard and then mulch 2 years later. It's created a big mat that's hard for the plants to break through. What's up with that? I think I've talked about the cardboard causing a dry socket sometimes. It takes, you know, for us in the Southeast United States, it rains all the time, and we're probably not going to get a dry socket. By dry socket, I mean, you have this barrier somewhere in the soil. You end up with this barrier that's dry between moist soil here and moist soil there, and it just always stays dry. That happens sometimes with that cardboard. It creates a little bit of a dry socket potentially, especially if you're in an area that doesn't get a good enough amount of rain to keep that cardboard moist and allow all the soil microbes to break it down. It can be a delay in your in all the processes actually working. And this can happen, it just doesn't necessarily have anything to do with cardboard. It can happen from over mulching. I've been in lots of gardens where the mulch has built up this thick, and it could be just leaves that have built up this thick. It could be, you know, where the landscape, I get paid to mulch twice a year and we're mulching this thing. It doesn't matter how thick the mulch is. And you'll dig in it, you'll find dry little pockets in it. Well, so nothing's gonna live in that. You know, it doesn't matter that it's, you know, the mulch should be producing life and protecting life. If it's completely and totally dry, nothing can live in it, right? Everything needs water, some water, not flooding water, but some water. So that's probably what went on there, is it's just stayed dry. For me, if I have a dry socket in the garden, I'm gonna go some more extended period of time letting that stuff break down until it's almost gone. We basically did that landscape job at that house and didn't mulch for almost a year, and it got weedy. Unfortunately, had to do some frequent weeding over there, but that mulch just needed to go away. Once it did, now it's just a regular mulch pattern, and that garden is absolutely thriving with some of the neighborhood tour video, odd jobs videos that we've done over the last few weeks, and transplanting that snow joey viburnum was done over to that house as well. It looks great over there. But when we got there, the mulch was this deep, and there was dry pockets all through it. It wasn't functioning properly. Okay, number 21, direction of house and directions that harmful winds would come from helps with knowing where to plant plants. So the house faces east, and I love an east-facing house. My last house was kind of southeast facing, and I like that as well, but really to me, east facing is the best. I can get all that morning sun in the morning. I can get things awake, get things working pretty good. And then sun setting in the west back here, you know, behind us, and the tree is blocking the worst of the west sun back here, which is really, really nice, because it's really hard to decide sometimes on those west walls what to plant if there's nothing blocking the sun. One of the first things I would do in a house is, if you have one of those spots where at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun is still hammering the west side of your house in July, I'm getting a tree planted somewhere back over here to start to work on that over time to get rid of that late day sun. Any harmful winds we would have would come out of the north, you know, the northwest over here, or the southwest, you know, over there. They would come back, you know, this direction on kind of straight line winds like you would have from, you know, some sort of front coming across the country. You know, this is where the wind would, you know, originate. With a hurricane, it's a who knows kind of thing, because they spin like this, and it just depends on where you are in the path of them. You never want to be on the northeast quadrant of a hurricane. And Hurricane Fran, I was in the northeast quadrant near the eye of the hurricane in Johnston County, and it was devastating. So even 90 miles inland. Okay, let's see. So somebody has a toddler that walks on the plants. They're up in Philadelphia. What will withstand this? I tell you what, a lot of the garden centers now have all their steppable plants in one section. We were up at Homewood Nursery a year or two ago filming, and I noticed that they had most of their plants that can be walked on all together. If you're watching this and you have a garden center, this is a suggestion for you, is put all those plants together, you know, that can be walked on. But there are, you know, thyme and blue star and creeping jenny and lots of ground cover plants that can take light foot traffic. Ajuga can take light foot traffic from a toddler, not from an adult walking through it all the time, you know, or something constantly cutting a path through it. But there are lots of ground covers that you can use, and you can, you know, this is another one you can Google for your zone. I'm assuming in Philly, you're probably zone 7B, but again, much shorter days than me. So I'm probably gonna lean toward things that are at least 7A hardy. 6B is probably most ideal. But there are sedums even. Some of our sedums can take some foot traffic, but most of the gardens, hopefully the garden center near you has the plants that can be walked on, you know, in a section together. Somebody added wood chips in North Carolina. They're planning to plant next spring. Could they add nitrogen to chips to accelerate the process as an insurance policy, just in case they're not going to break down? Yeah, you could if you wanted to. That's what I'm going to do next month when we go back down to Wallace. The wood chips we're using is chunky. It's very chunky. It's much more chunky than this material I'm using here, and I am worried that it won't be broken down by next February when we start planting. It's a long time from now, so hopefully it'll be mostly broken down. But we're going to be putting in some irrigation there so I can keep the wood chips moist, and I'm going to add some nitrogen as well to make sure they're breaking down. And checking that we're still recording. Okay. Somebody has leaves used as mulch, and they have a lot of them. Their shrubs are having some issues where the shrub was buried so much in the leaves. That's the point where you have too many leaves. And we left the leaves down here on the ground this winter and last winter, and I've always left the leaves down. And the only reason I wouldn't leave the leaves down is to impress somebody on a YouTube channel. And I just got past that of going, what am I doing? I mean, I've always just blown the leaves back in the beds and let nature take its course. But I've never had 4 giant oaks in a garden that were burying burying the beds this deep. So that's a whole different kind of thing. I don't know how many trees this person has, but I'm just saying that as an example. There are a couple gardens in this neighborhood have 85-year-old oaks that, you know, they're gonna bury it in so many leaves, it's just too many. And the solution there is to take them out to the driveway and chop them up, or get some sort of shredder, or mow them, you know, so that you break them up some and make them smaller, or send some off the property, you know, or pile them somewhere else. But you need to get them down to a reasonable amount. There is a reasonable amount, right, for anything. We have a reasonable amount. I've got this one giant oak above us, and it jumps a few too many back here, but I don't have anything being dumped up here, so I can just take some of those and rake them over here. And we just balance them back out, and I don't allow them to be more than, you know, after you get a good rain on them, it settles down. I wouldn't want them more than a couple inches thick, probably. Okay, let's see. Somebody wants to put a pink dogwood at the center of an island. Is it a good idea? Do they seek water and make sewer and water pipe issues? I actually don't know. I mean, I don't think dogwoods root all that aggressively, but I also do not want you to sue me in 15 years when the roots go through the sewer. So I'm not going to answer that part of the question. But I will say, just in general, if you're talking about at the center of the bed that's in full sun, it may not be you know, the best choice in the world. If you are putting a pink dogwood, red dogwood, white dogwood, whatever, in a bed that's in the center of a, you know, big bed that's in the full sun, you definitely, at a minimum, need to underplant it with some ground cover, some low-growing shrubs to try to shade the roots a bit. Because you watch where most dogwoods grow, and we've got one back over here in the neighbor's garden coming out of the woods. You know, this is, when you're riding down the interstate, this is what you see with dogwoods, is they got their roots down in the shade, and they're just like those vines I was talking about earlier. A lot of our understory trees, that's the way they grow. They grow on the edge of the woods with their roots in the shade and the tops out. So when we bring them to our urban and suburban lots to do home gardening, we're putting them in unnatural spaces, typically in the lawns or in full sun, or just their roots in the full sun. So keep that in mind. If it is full sun, underplant it. Most of the dogwoods in this neighborhood, native dogwoods in this neighborhood, in manicured, mowed lawn spaces are dying. The ones that are seedlings that are out here in the woods that nobody's messing with are thriving. So that'll tell you, you know, they're not necessarily the best trees for pollution, heat pollution, urban, you know, heat islands, foot traffic areas, you know, that kind of thing. Somebody wants colorful part shade shrubs in zone 8A, non-flowering for outside the door. You know, there are chartreuse colored, conifers like Chamilia obtusa. There's one that's going to be in a video on Tuesday that I just planted back here. Most leafy things are going to flower in some way or another. The sunshine, the Florida Sunshine Elysium back there doesn't flower a whole lot. It flowers so insignificantly that it's really hard to even call it a flowering plant. But it's a showy plant that would work near your foundation if you're trying to find something that's non-flowering and showy. It has gold foliage year-round. My Juliet Clara, that would be another one that's been in several videos over here. Beautiful plant. It flowers, but it's insignificant. Such an insignificant flower, no reason to talk about it. It's like talking about boxwoods as flowering plants. They're absolutely flowering plants, but we're not really growing boxwood for flowers, though. Last question for this week. Somebody's in zone 7B, 8A, so somewhere probably just west of me, in a hair cooler area than I'm in maybe. They got a 3x3 space that's blasted by the sun all day in the summer, then shaded in the winter. This is that probably that northeast side of the house. This is one of the hardest places to landscape. I answer this question occasionally just because I want to bring up that sometimes when I lean on native plants, something like a dwarf Yopon holly in this instance, that would be a good native low doming shrub. Those plants are very adaptable to the changes in soil moisture over the course of a year in a space like that, and the changes in sunlight in a space like that. A good portion of our native shrubs. But then I'll say another non-native would be any abelia like this. This is Miss Lemon abelia, but they're green foliage abelias, variegated abelias, any of the low growing abelias for that little 3x3 space. One of them like that would fill that little 3x3 space up, and that thing will adapt to the full sun, shade, changeable conditions as well, but it's a non-native. But a lot of our native plants, this is when I usually throw out that northeast side where it's wet in the winter, and wet and shady in the winter, and hot as blazes and dry in the summertime. Probably some native plants for those types of spaces. I had Itea in that space in the old house, and I had Calacanthus in that space at the old house, Clethra, and all the go-to native deciduous shrubs, because they don't have their leaves in the winter and they just don't care what the winter is like. And then they have, right when the sun starts moving back into that space as they're leafing out in the spring, and they do just fine in it. So there you go. Thank you guys very much. Again, there's only maybe 10, as this video is going up, 10, 12 days, something like that left on the $30 discount for the weekly garden planner. Thank you so much to those of you who have signed up for it. We're going to complete the entire year over the course of the rest of the spring and summer, and look forward to adding content to that well into the future. Learn to Garden video series, also available on my website, and t-shirts as well, and more upcoming t-shirts. So thank you guys so much for following along. We really appreciate you know, the tremendous positivity of the audience from this channel. It really it's always just fantastic, you know, to read your comments and you know, see what you guys you know, have to say about what we're doing and what we're trying to teach here in our Raleigh, North Carolina garden. Thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, I'm Annie Johnson with the Gardens of Southeastern North Carolina, and I want to personally invite you to our event on April 27th, the Garden Gala. It's from 1 to 6 p.m. and every ticket purchase supports our nonprofit, so we would absolutely love for you to come. It's going to be a day of music, a band, the Catalinas, will be out here. There'll be food like wood-fired pizza, sliders, burgers, drinks, and more. And most importantly, you'll get to explore our beautiful gardens and check out our garden center. We hope to see you out here. It's going to be a really great day.